Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ground Pass podcast. This is going to be another bonus episode that we're doing during the Australian Open. And I have here a returning guest, Will. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be back. I just got back from Australia yesterday, so I think it's like 2:15 a.m. for me right now. But I've found the transition to be okay so far. Even on
Okay.
the way there, like I don't know what it was I did right this time, but the jet lag is not bad right now. So I am
Did you sleep
feeling
on either
okay.
flight?
I was able to. So on the way back, it was really nice. It was almost weird. Like we had maybe 50 people on the entire flight, and the plane fits probably 300 or something. So
That is so
everybody could
strange.
everybody could have like 3 rows to themselves. So I had like a row of 3 seats to myself, and just leaned up against like the window and was able to
Right.
stretch out. So I was able to get for an airplane, like decent sleep. So I think that
Okay.
helped. But yeah, I don't see how they're making money if they're having
If
a
they're
flight
only
with
fit,
50 people.
that's not even half full. That's like,
No,
wow.
no, it
Okay.
was like 15 or 20% full. Like it was a joke, but it was
Crazy,
awesome for
crazy.
me. So I
Yeah.
loved it.
Hey, especially on those long haul flights, if you can have all the space, like that's exactly what you
Hmm.
want. But I have you here for everyone who doesn't know, Will is from the tennis tribe, and you basically cover all things doubles. And that is why I have you here today. I think the very first conversation that we had, I was very sort of inspired to add more doubles to my schedule, my watch schedule, especially when I'm at tournaments. And as a podcast that supports ground passes, I think doubles is something that on a ground pass, it's always available to you to watch. And we like to promote people going to see those matches that are super exciting and fun. And hopefully we can get people to get to know these players more. By going and watching them live in person. So you're just back from Australia. In general, what was that like as a tournament for you?
Yeah. So this was my second time. I went in 2020, right before COVID.
Mm,
Uh, it is still, after going a second time, I think it's my favorite tournament. It like Melbourne is amazing. So I stayed like in their downtown. Basically, I had an Airbnb. The price for the Airbnbs is very reasonable. I think I
hmm.
had like a one bedroom for 150 a night, maybe even a little less
Wow.
than that.
Yeah.
For like the heart of downtown, you walk 15. It was like a 15 or 20-minute walk to the tennis courts. The walk is along this beautiful river with like the downtown skyline on this really nice walking path. It's just the contrast between that and how to get to Queens for the U.S. Open is just it's a totally the opposite.
Yeah.
So I love the tournament. The grounds are great. They do a great job with the just entertainment outside of the tennis as well. There's like a huge kids area. It's almost like a theme park for kids.
Mm.
As you walk in from the downtown side, the food options are good. The drink options are good. One of my favorite parts about it is um, when you do go to, on your grounds pass, you go to get food, or maybe I think theirs is called like the lemon ace, which is their
Oh,
version of the
yeah. That's their
honey
new
deuce or
drink.
something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not only like a reasonable price, it's like 25 Australian dollars, which I think is like 15 US,
Mm.
but they don't spin the thing around and ask you for a tip after with any of because they don't do tips in Australia. So I love that. At the US
Yeah.
Open, you pay $25 for the honeydews, and then they say, do you want to tip
And
20%?
then,
So you're
yeah.
paying like $30. So, anyways, the prices are reasonable. The tennis is amazing. The venue's amazing. The weather's good. The city's great. It's my favorite tournament. It really is. I had a great time.
Yeah. Everyone I've talked to so far that's been there and gone. It's the same thing. I remember I was talking to Craig Shapiro on a previous episode, and just the way he described it, the way he described it, he was like, as if the US Open was in Central Park, like in the middle of
Hmm.
the city by the
Yeah,
water.
it's good.
That
Yep.
is a dream. That is
Yeah.
it just sounds like an absolute dream. And it the Australian Open has definitely moved way up my list of,
Yeah.
must go to tournaments because it just sounds so awesome. So you were in Australia for the Australian Open covering the doubles. How was the doubles tournament this year? Because I also kind of want to get into a little bit the new teams that have formed for this new season, because I think there's some
Hmm.
really exciting teams in there. But just in general, like the doubles competition, how was that so far? And by the way, we're recording this Friday 24th. I will release this episode today, and it's before the finals. So we will
Hmm.
preview that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the tournaments have both been great. The semifinal matchups on both sides were really good, especially the women's side. I mean, it was two fantastic matchups, and they both went 3 sets. They were both great matches. So yeah, both tournaments have been great. You've seen like a lot of new partnerships, like you said. It's always interesting this time of year to see how they work out. Last year, well, every year you have new partnerships in Australia, and then a lot of times I feel like by the time Indian Wells comes around, some of them have already broken up because they just don't have a great run. So it'll be interesting to
Mm.
monitor that throughout the rest of February. I can't say names, but I've like heard rumors about certain partnerships that may be like not going super well.
Already.
And other people have like told me this, but haven't told me names. So I honestly, even if I wanted to tell you names, I don't know them. Um, but yeah, but other partnerships are doing great, like Sue and Ostapinko are doing obviously in the final
Yeah.
coming up here, and yeah, there's a lot to kind of cover and a lot to keep an eye on throughout the finals and then the next month as well.
So let's get into some of these new partnerships. You started there with Ostapenko and Heishui. I mean, let's talk about them a little bit, but also touch on
Hmm.
maybe some of your favorite new partnerships. Or,
Yeah.
I also kind of want to talk about some partnerships are that only started last year but are doing so well in the case of sort of Patton and Harry Heliovera. So what about Ostapenko and Heishu? Like, what makes them such a great partnership other than the fact that they just seem to have completely contrasting personalities?
Yeah, they have contrasting game styles as well, which actually is a good thing. I think it's going to be very difficult for opponents to, and has been very difficult for opponents to find any sort of rhythm against them
Mm.
because you hit the ball to Sue and you get the ball back at like 40 miles an hour, and you hit the ball to Ostapinko and you get the ball back at 140 miles an hour. So I'm exaggerating, obviously, a little bit, but it is kind of like that. And Sue is going to dominate from the net primarily. Ostapinko is going to dominate from the baseline, which is something Sue's coach Paul McNamee, who had on my podcast last year, told me he likes. He's a big fan of having one person dominate from the back of the court, another person dominate from the front of the court. So I think that's probably why the partnership kind of came to be. They did not do well to start the year. I think they lost their first match, or maybe they won a match and then lost a match.
Mm.
In the last like 6 to 9 months, Shea Sue has not done super well. Last year, her and Mertens won the Australian Open, won Indian Wells, and then the rest of the year they didn't really have any great results, and they lost a lot of early round matches. I think they lost first round at the U.S. Open, but in a lot of tournaments, yeah, they didn't do super well. So a lot of people were wondering, is this the end of Shea Sue's kind of doubles dominance? And
Mm.
it's clearly not, because she is in the finals coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, yeah. It's been nice seeing them together. And I remember I mean, I heard about the partnership and I was like, this is crazy. And I remember
Yeah.
watching one of their early rounds, and you're right, they did lose early. And, I sort of chucked it up to, well, they just started. Maybe they're still figuring each other out and like how things are going to
Hmm.
work. But also in singles, Ostapenko kind of had a very slow start. She was out early as well at the Australian Open in singles. So,
Hmm.
might be some of that stuff as well, but it's really been nice watching them. On the completely opposite spectrum is what I'm calling sort of the sort of young Russian players, Diana Schneider and Mira Andreeva, who kind of burst on the scene, which I think is just Mira's thing. She just loves to burst onto the scene. But in doubles at the Olympics last year, where they played together, they hadn't played together before, and they get to the finals and win a silver medal. And it seems like they've committed this season to playing the whole season doubles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. With singles players, you never know how much they're going to play, but I think with the talent that they have, and then also this Australian Open, I sat behind the baseline at Margaret Court the other day during their quarterfinal match, I believe, and they know how to play doubles. It's a lot of these singles players will come out and play some doubles, but they're just kind of banging the ball from the baseline and really stagnant at the net. But I would say, especially Schneider, she knows how to move at the net and has the hands to be a really great doubles player. So I don't think this is the last time we're going to hear them making a semifinal run or a deep run in a Grand Slam. And I don't think, if they want to, they can probably manage their double schedule and not have to play really any 250s or 500s and just play the 1000s and majors and still make the WTA finals at the end of the year. I think they're that good if they want to be able to do that.
That's great. I mean, they're just fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Another fun pairing. It kind of, going back to singles a little bit, I didn't know if this was one of those like, oh, it's a Grand Slam, let's just get together. But Rus and Kostyuk, they
Mm-hmm.
seem to have a lot of fun on court. I don't know if you watched any of their matches.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I'd never watched them in person either. And yeah, they were very entertaining. And they're good at doubles too. So they made I think the quarters in Australia maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
Um,
So they've played
so
before.
I believe so.
Okay. Okay.
Double check me on that, but I'm pretty sure they made the quarters. They've definitely partnered up before, and yeah, it's interesting that this is something that I was like thinking about on the plane ride home. But it seems like a lot of, and I don't know why I've never made this connection, but a lot of the best doubles players are still good at singles, but not the top of the game at singles, right? So like you've got Siniakova, who's like hovered around 50 to 80 in singles for a long time. Shea Su Wei was top 30 or 40 in singles for a while in her career. Elise Mertens is somebody who's been around 20 to 50 in singles for a long time. So a lot of these top, and then you talked about the Russian team, Schneider and Andreeva, they're both good singles players that are not top 5 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out they happen to be really good at doubles as well. So a lot of these players who can hang from the baseline with anyone, that's what Siniakova can do, and a lot of these singles players can do, but also have that kind of doubles IQ and the skills at the net make for the best doubles players. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing with a lot of the results here in Australia. And Kostyuk can kind of fall into that category, right? They're both singles players as well, and they, after watching them, they do know how to play doubles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, jumping into Siniakova, who I think last year the theme for her was she could just pick up any partner and go win a Grand Slam.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it seems like because I didn't know what was going to happen. So last year, she partnered with Taylor Townsend, but they couldn't really start together right away because I feel like Taylor Townsend had some injuries. Am I correct? To start, because I
Uh,
know she kind of jumped around a little bit. Like she did the French Open with Coco Gauff, and I think
yeah,
she
well,
did
she started the
Madrid with someone
year.
else.
Yeah, she started the year with Storm Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So Storm in April tore her Achilles, and I heard that she'll be back in the next few months, which is
Oh,
great to
great.
hear.
Yeah.
Um, so Siniakova started the year with Storm. Storm tears her Achilles. Then Siniakova wins Roland Garros with Coco, wins Wimbledon with Taylor, and then from there, I don't know. I guess she was just kind of looking at who can I get into the WTA finals with. Maybe she asked Coco first, maybe not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Coco focused mostly on singles last year, and obviously her and Jess had split up, decided to split up at the beginning of the year. So yeah, I think at that point she saw she could still make the WTA finals with Taylor, and obviously they had a lot of success. So they're continuing this year, at least for now. I don't know if they have plans through the end of the year. But yeah, they've obviously had a good start to the year, being in the finals coming up on Sunday.
Yeah. So that's the women's finals. Ostapenko, Heshue, and Siniakova and Townsend. What do you take of that I mean, first of all, I think that's such a great finals lineup. Um,
Mm-hmm.
anyone, please watch that final. It's going to be a fun time. But what do you think about it? Who do you think might be coming out on top?
Yeah, it's really a blockbuster matchup. Like if at the beginning of the tournament picked you surveyed 1,000 doubles fans, like who do they want to see? Like this is the final that they want to see. This is
Nice.
like if you were to equate it to like men's singles, this is like a Djokovic Alcaraz type final. So the best two doubles players probably the last 10 years have been Shea Sue and Katerina Siniakova. So that's what part of what makes this so exciting. Who comes out on top? I think it's really 50-50. I mean, this is a really good matchup. I kind of lean Ostapenko and Sue just because Ostapenko has made. I saw this tweet earlier, and I knew this, but I didn't kind of put it together. She's made the finals of 3 consecutive hardcourt Grand Slams.
Wow.
So she and Kitchenok were in the finals of the Australian Open last year and lost to Sue and Mertens, and then she and Kitchenok won the U.S. Open in doubles.
Hmm.
So Ostapenko is playing some really good hardcourt doubles, and Shea Sue's Shea Sue. Siniakova is going to do what she does. Potentially she'll be right there with them, one of the best players on the court. And then Taylor Townsend is kind of the wild card. Like I feel like it's going to be kind of up to her if she and Siniakova win this match. I feel like I
Hmm.
know what I'm going to get from the other 3 players. And Townsend has these spells where she's just on fire and she looks like the best player on the court. And then she also
Yeah.
has these spells where she makes some questionable, not decisions, but just some errors where it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And
Yeah.
it'll be a string of them within like several games. So if she plays well, of course they can win. But if she doesn't, I feel like it's going to go the other way. I feel like she's going to kind of be the X factor there.
Love it. I love a good X Factor. I love a good X Factor. Excited to see how that one goes. Okay, jumping to the men, new partnerships, or are there any new partnerships on the men's side this tournament that you were excited to see come through? I know the one that I was,
Yeah.
I think ever since I knew them as doubles players, it was always a question to me: why don't Skupski and Salisbury play together?
Hmm.
They're both British. They were both on separate teams that were doing very well. So it was interesting to see them together now for the first time. How do you think their tournament went for this first time round?
I would say that they would probably tell you it was a little disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
They lost in the second round, I believe. They didn't make the quarters. I know that. And I actually talked with Louis Caillet, the basically head of men's doubles for the LTA, and that podcast will be coming out soon. But he talked about how the match was disappointing that they lost, and it was really interesting talking to him. It's a fun interview because he's just such a smart coach in general, regardless of singles or doubles. But he talked about how there's like he coaches the players and then he coaches the performer, and the performer has to show up for the player to like execute the strategies. So to get the performer to show up, they have to be in the right mindset. It's more like intangibles, I guess.
Yeah.
And he said for that match the performers didn't show up, so they don't even review the statistics or the strategy or anything like that in a loss like that. They try to figure out, why didn't you show up as a team? Like, why wasn't your effort there? Why wasn't your focus there? So it sounds like, yeah, maybe there was something else going on. I don't know if they were, yeah, I have no idea. I can't even begin
Yeah.
to speculate, but it sounds like they weren't at their best in terms of mindset. So that was a little bit disappointing, but I imagine that they will do well throughout the rest of the year. I mean, they're both fantastic doubles players. Another new partnership is Nikola Mektic and Michael Venus. They were actually one of my picks to make a deep run, and they lost first round. So
Ooh.
I was a little off on that. They won in Auckland earlier this year, though, and they're coached by Dan Kiernan, who coaches Dabrowski and Routliff. And
Hmm.
I spoke with Dan a few times throughout the tournament. He's a great guy, great coach. I think they're going to be a team to watch out for throughout the rest of the year for sure. They are just going to, it's a new team early on. They're going to have some speed bumps and things like that they'll work through. But I think throughout the season they're going to continue to improve. So
A
those are
team,
two to keep an eye on for sure.
yeah. A team I kind of like talked about a bunch on Ground Pass because I still don't get why they were not seeded, and maybe you can explain it to me. But Rajiv Ram and Austin Krajicek seem like a crazy team to be unseeded in a draw.
Yeah. Yeah, the men's, I talked with a few people about this in Australia. So the men's draws now on the doubles tour are just so difficult. I feel like especially the 1000 events and a lot of times at majors, but especially the 1000 events, these draws come out and I'm like, every single team could lose first round. Like
Mm,
there's just no, and it's never like that in singles, right? Like you look at Sabalenka's draw, like you're never saying like, oh, she's not going to win that first round or she might lose that first round match. Like,
yeah.
um, but in the men's doubles, for some reason, these 1000 events, it's just insane how much depth there is and how many good teams there are. Austin just didn't have the best year last year in terms of ATP events. He and Rajiv won the silver medal in Paris. That does not count for points. I think it
Right.
should, but it doesn't. So he and Rajiv winning that didn't help their ranking. Rajiv and Joe Salisbury, who had partnered for 5 or 6 years, didn't do as well last year. So their combined ranking just wasn't high enough to get seeded in this tournament. But they made the third round, had a decent run. I think at the time that they lost 6-3 to Harry Heliovara and Henry Patton, and at the time I think they would have been pretty disappointed, and I'm sure they still are. But Harry and Henry are in the finals tomorrow,
Yeah.
so it's not like they lost. It's not like it was a bad loss. Harry and Henry were serving really well that day. I went to that match. Men's doubles so often comes down to how well you're serving or how well you're returning.
Mm.
The other side of that coin. I feel like they're just playing at a super high level. I think Rajiv and Austin are going to do really well this year, though.
Yeah, I'm excited to see them going forward, especially as an American team. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, and then that brings us to one of the finalists there, Harry Hilivera and Henry Patton, who
Mm-hmm.
are in the finals of their second Grand Slam. So they got together last year, won Wimbledon, and here they are at
Mm-hmm.
the finals of the Australian Open. Like, I mean, has there been a more successful sort of like coming together of two players in such a short amount of time? I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, they're playing well. Harry's yeah, it just seems like he's really dedicated to his craft and like
Mm,
obviously they all are, but he's seems really focused like on improvement and I had him on the podcast this off season and he's just so entertaining too. He's a great kind of there will be many I would hope like many faces to men's doubles, but he's certainly one of them. Like there's not a ton of like super entertaining like personalities right now on the men's doubles tour. At least some people say that. I'm not sure I agree with it,
hmm
uh, but he is definitely one of them. He's really entertaining. So obviously he's playing at a super high level. His partner Henry is a really good British player. Louis Kaye, who I mentioned, is kind of overseeing Henry and the team overall. And then Calvin Betton is their coach, who I also interviewed on the podcast, and that was published earlier this week. And he's doing a really good job with them as well. When they won Wimbledon, they were unseeded, but they had been together. Calvin talks about it on the podcast, but they had been together for a few months, and they had really dominated the Challenger Tour.
mm,
And like chosen to play a few challengers instead of going to play like a 500 or 250 just to get like more matches in. And they um a lot of people were surprised to see them win Wimbledon last year, but people who followed doubles knew that they were a contender even though they weren't seeded because they had been playing so well. And regardless of the level you're winning at, the challenger level, the ATP level, if you're winning a lot, then it can kind of, there's a bit of a snowball effect there.
Yeah. I got to talk to Harry and Henry at the DC Open last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, they
Um,
mic'd him up for that, and it went kind of viral. At least for
yeah.
doubles, it did.
It is. I mean, when I talked to them, he hadn't done it yet. Harry hadn't done it, and then
Mm,
they sort of. I watched the match after. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think
yeah.
it's, and I get it. Players maybe feel like they have to sort of be careful of what they're saying, but I think that can be fixed with broadcasting a little bit if you sort of delay it so they feel free to be able to say whatever it is that they need to say. But I just think to help the audience understand what's going on, it's nice to have those things, especially from people watching from home. When I go to tournaments and I watch doubles in person, I learn so much from just
Hmm.
listening to them talk to each other and watching their signals and, oh, what does that signal mean, and all that stuff. So I'm all for miking. I hope it's something that comes back. But I think Henry and Harry are a fun team. We need to
Yeah.
come up with a combo name for them. When I talked to them, we were looking at double H
Yeah.
squared.
H squared. Yeah,
You
that could
know,
work.
we'll make something up. But I think they are a fun team, and I think that's what doubles need. Someone like Harry, who's very just personable and has a
Yeah,
lot of
he's
energy.
charismatic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think is really great to have, and hopefully people can latch onto that. So they're in the finals. The other team in the finals are Bolelli and Vavasori, the Italians. They've been doing so well. Talk a little bit about them, and then what you think about that final matchup.
Yeah, so they are into their third Grand Slam final in the last 12 months. So they made the finals in Melbourne last year. They made the finals at Roland Garros, and yeah, have been one of the most consistent teams the last over the last 12 months, even outside of those three tournaments. So yeah, it's a really interesting matchup. Bolelli and Vavasori play some pretty aggressive doubles. They play super tight on the net, big serve from Vavasori especially, and they have really good hands at the net. So I think something to look for is who can execute the lob return a bit better,
Mm.
and kind of neutralize some of the serving, and neutralize that net player. Henry and Harry kind of play a similar game style. I mean, it's the general style of men's doubles right now. You know, a lot of I formation, a lot of servers partner really close to the net and just putting pressure on the returner to, come up with something in a small window. And it's very, very difficult to do. I think it's going to be a very tight match. I don't really have a pick for this one. I guess if I had to pick, I guess I'll pick the Italians just because this is
Mm.
their third Grand Slam final. They haven't won one yet. Harry and Henry won Wimbledon last year, so it'd be cool to see the Italians get one. I know they've worked hard for it, but I don't know. It could go either way for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I personally just would love to see Double H get through again. I think
Yeah.
it's like super cool. And yeah, I mean, again, the men and women's doubles finals, it's just so blockbuster. And I really hope people can start getting to know these players and latching onto them. And something I kind of want to go into a little bit now, talking about like the state of doubles or where we can see it grow and improve, and or sort of get more into the public sphere of like people recognizing doubles players and stuff. One thing I saw at this tournament, which we've talked about before when you're on, is there were a lot of doubles teams wearing the same outfit.
Yeah.
So Henry and Harry now are sponsored by Lotto and wear the same
Hmm.
thing. And I believe Bolelli and Vavasori also wear the same
Yeah.
brand.
Yeah.
Um,
They looked great in their
it
kit
looks
on.
so
Yeah.
cool. And then I
Yeah.
saw that little viral thing. I think they were actually junior tennis players, but it was like two sets of sisters. And they were
Yeah.
both like one was Adidas and they were wearing red, and the other one's wearing the Nike kind of blue
Yeah. It was the
sort of
junior doubles final, I think.
court
Yeah.
thing. I was
Yeah.
like, yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's what
I
it
feel
needs to
like
be.
it's,
Yeah.
when you
I'm with
when it's
you.
on a
I'm with you.
court
That's
and
what.
you just see like four people wearing different things, I don't know. I feel like you're not really building that sort of partnership a little bit. Like now we're thinking of like, oh, what are we going to call this team? Or that sort of thing. Like even
Hmm.
someone like Neil Skupski and Salisbury, they weren't wearing the same thing, but their color scheme was like, because one was wearing solid purple and then the other one was like solid red, and they kind of just like looked cool together.
Yeah.
Um, is this something that they're actually, because I was surprised this tournament. I don't think I've seen this many doubles pairings wearing the same brand. Is this a
Hmm.
new thing happening on tour?
Not that I know of. I think we've also seen more people from the same country playing together this year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so Lloyd Glasspool and Julian Cash, both from Britain, are also teaming up. So the UK's got two teams who are all kind of all English teams. But I think that I guess these players are just like teaming up and deciding to go with the same brand. I'm really not sure. It might just be
Interesting.
some kind of coincidence, but I'm with you. I like it a lot. I really hate when two players are wearing the same thing and they're on opposite teams, and then they're
That's even the
not
worst
wearing the
part.
same
Yeah.
thing as their partner.
Yeah.
That bothers me a lot. Another problem we have is like when I was there, especially week one. So week one, you have tons of people there on their grounds pass, and they're going to all the doubles matches, and every single like mini stadium there on those outside courts is packed. Like there's long lines to get in, one out into a lot of these doubles matches. And I'm sitting in there, and a lot of the people behind me are tennis fans, and they're not, you can tell like they don't know how the tour works. Like they're kind of new to all this, and they're like, oh, what does
Mm-hmm.
the 15 by their name mean? Oh, it's their ranking. And they're like, well, is that for just that person or for the team? How does it work?
Mm.
Like they don't know. And they also don't know who the players are. So they're like, which one's Bolelli? Like they don't know. So if we could have a way to like figure that out, like so that people there could figure out like which one is which. And then when
Yeah.
they, as they're watching, maybe one of them, like maybe it's Harry, he does like he has a crazy reaction to a point or something. They're like, oh, I love that Hiliavara guy. And then maybe they look him up on Instagram later and start following him and so on. So like I think kind of correcting a lot of these like small things can help. Another thing that you mentioned earlier is trying to or being able to learn from some of these doubles matches. And some commentators are better than others. There was a few I was watching recently who like didn't even have a good understanding of what the signals meant, and it
Mm.
was really embarrassing. Like it was, yeah, and this was on ESPN as well. So it's like I don't know that I think that the broadcasters just don't care enough to like get good commentators on there, or maybe the good commentators are like on the singles matches or something like that. I'm not sure, but yeah, I was listening to that and I was imagining like if I was new to this broadcast or came here to learn something, like they're just doing a really bad job of it because they didn't understand the signals. They described the formations the wrong way. Like they described who calls the serve plays incorrectly. Like there was a bunch of errors that I noticed that like somebody new to the sport would not pick up on. And
Right.
yeah, it's just like kind of a bad look for the game.
Right, right. No, you're completely right there because again, like you said, if it's someone who's new who's trying to learn, you're telling them the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And now they've learned the wrong thing, and
Yeah.
that's not
And they're
what
getting
you.
confused. Like some of it was
Yeah.
confusing too. So it's like I think people would embrace it more and would watch more if that production was, there. The miking them up is a great idea, especially on changeovers. I think changeovers, there's more kind of dialogue between
Right.
players. Just creating like a better TV experience will help for sure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, finally, before we go, because I know you have to run, because this is something that came up that actually I was, because with a lot of things, I think I just like to observe and, hopefully see how we can make these things better. But this was actually a little bit upsetting because I had seen on the social media feeds coming out of Australia that for the mixed doubles, and I know we didn't talk mostly about mixed doubles here, but I think it carries through. But for the mixed doubles, which was being played on a show court, but it was being played first, they were gonna let ground pass holders go into the stadium and
Hmm.
watch. Then there was a correction, which I found out late, but it was like, no, actually, not gonna let ground pass holders in. It's only
Hmm.
going to be people who have tickets to this men's semifinal match because this was on Rod
It was on
Laver.
Rod Laver. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what you tuned into then was a doubles final, a mixed doubles final that, by the way, was two Australian teams at the Australian Open,
Hmm.
and there were maybe 500 people there
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a packed stadium. And I will post the photo because I was just like, because I see this a lot, even at the US Open. I see this. The grounds are packed. The grounds are packed. And then you turn on the TV to the show court, and there is nobody in there. And you're
Hmm.
wondering why. Is there no way, you know? And I kind of, part of me was like, okay, so maybe they're worried about having to then clear out all those people and then reseat the people who
Yeah.
actually have tickets. And I get that, but there has to be a way to be able to do that, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah. I mean, you just said it. Like there's got to be a solution to this. I think the problem is I just don't think they care that much.
Mm.
Yeah, which is sad, and
It's
unfortunate.
sad, especially, again, I need to emphasize these are home players. The two
Mhm.
mixed doubles finals, they were
Yeah.
both from Australia,
Yeah, they're
and I
both
think,
also.
wouldn't you want to give them the best
Yeah. Yeah, they were both
final?
Australian teams. I think you're right. I think they just were worried about having to clear out the stadium for the
Mm,
men's semifinal, which was only one set of tennis. But
mm,
I think that yeah, I don't know what the solution is. I'm still trying to like kind of dig and figure out what all happened. I know the communication was poor. They like made a mistake and then emailed the media. I don't know if they emailed ticket holders. It seemed like they probably did not, which to me is just like a really bad marketing strategy to like rely on the media to relay information to your customers. Shouldn't you like let your customers know directly
yeah,
that hey,
this has changed.
your men's semifinal ticket also has access to mixed doubles. Like don't forget to show up at this time.
To show up
Um,
at this time, they're home players. It's going to be a fun
and
time,
and it's
you
something.
know.
This is something I've noticed. Like people say, like some of the haters say, like people just don't want to watch doubles, right? Or like people, look at the stadiums and like you see like nobody's in the doubles. Well, this is a clear example of like poor communication and like the tournament just like not caring that much. This is not a representation of like people didn't want to show up. People didn't
Yeah,
even know about it. And people who did want to show up on the grounds pass couldn't. Like they weren't allowed in. So I notice it a lot once you get into like later week two of the majors. Week one, all the doubles courts are packed. Even I went to a Kia Arena, which is like I don't know, they're like third or fourth biggest arena. Like it's a
mm-hmm.
pretty good size, a few thousand. I don't know how many. For two different matches week one, and they were both packed. Like they were just as crowded as the singles quarterfinal I went to between Sonego and Shelton. Like so, week one, the doubles courts are all packed. It's like late week two, like the quarterfinals and semifinals and finals. They're in the bigger stadiums, and they have less people than they did in week one in the smaller stadiums.
Right.
And to me, it's got to be a lack of promotion, a lack of
Yeah, it doesn't
awareness, because
really, it doesn't make sense because as you
it
get
doesn't
on
add up.
later, yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
doesn't add up. Like, why week one are all these people like so happy to go watch doubles, and you can hear them in the crowd like oohing and eyeing at every single point, and then week two, all of a sudden they're like, no, we don't like doubles anymore. Like, no, it's
yeah.
not what's happening. They just don't know that it's going on. So
Right. Okay. We could talk forever about the
we
double
could.
situation and how we can make it better, but I'm going to let you go, Will. Thank you so much for coming on Ground Pass and talking doubles with us. I will leave the links to all those episodes that you talked about in the description of this podcast. So please check it out. They're always a fun listen, and just trying to learn more about the doubles game helps you appreciate it more and also get to know who these players are and their personalities. So thank you, Will. Excited to watch the finals, whoever the winners are. I think it's four teams of really awesome
Mhm.
players.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Bye.